Okay, Masechet Eruvin, Daf Tet Vav 15. We have three very interesting topics today. The first one is about a pre-existing lechi. We'll explain further. Second topic is about using a live animal as a lechi or for other purposes, unusual purposes. And the third topic is if you have a wall that has an even amount of gaps and wall there. We know it has to be majority, but what if it's exactly even? Okay, and for each of these, we'll bring various sources and proofs, one way and the other. So we start Itamad, Lechi Almed Me'elav, Abaye Amad Have Lechi, Rava Amad La Have Lechi. Okay, in general, you have a courtyard, and so right, a shared alleyway. So you're going to go and you get some piece of wood, a pole, and you make a side post. And you do that before Shabbat, and you have in mind that this side post will be a lechi that will be used. That's the normal case, and that obviously would be good according to everybody. The question here is, what if there was a pole there already? There was a telephone pole or a tree, and we didn't make it in order to be a lechi. It was made on its own. And now, later on, we decide, you know what? There's a pole here. It happens to be right in the perfect spot. Can we use it as a lechi? So Abaye says, that's okay. You can use a pre-existing pole as a lechi. Rava says, no, you have to make it new, specifically in mind to be a lechi. Okay, good. Now, a clarification. Everyone agrees that you have to have in mind that it's a lechi from before Shabbat starts. You can't designate a lechi on Shabbat. That case where that would happen, for example, would be, let's say the lechi that I have there fell down, and then on Shabbat I say, oh, that tree, I'll consider that a lechi. Everyone agrees that you can't do. It certainly has to be designated before Shabbat. But the question still is, do I have to make it originally when I first build it? Do I have to make it as a lechi, or can I use something that was pre-built and say, oh, I'd like that to be a lechi? Abaye amar have lechi. Abaye is more mekel. He says, as long as you designate it before Shabbat started, so I had in mind, why do I have to build it just for that? Rava Amar, lahave lechi kevan debekara, lavadate dechi avidi lahave lechi. Rava is more stringent. He says, since I did not have in mind at the beginning when I first erected it to be a lechi, then it is not a lechi. Okay. So that's the introduction to the machloket. Now we're going to actually take it into a related topic, not a lechi, but a mechisa. Right now, let's assume that the lechi and mechisa is the same. And just like they have a disagreement regarding lechi, also regarding mechisa. What's the mechisa is just a partition. Lechi works as a pole, and we're going to see, is it a signpost? Is it an imaginary wall? The lechi works only in front of an alleyway, a mavoy. Whereas mechisa is used for lots of things in halacha, like a sukkah, for kilayim, for many different things. Mechisa and Bet Knesset, not yet, but eventually. But that doesn't have as strict halachic requirements, but is also similar. Okay, so a mechisa, does that also, a mechisa, let's say for a sukkah, does that have to be built specifically for a sukkah? Or can I take something that was pre-existing and make it? This is very practical. We use this all the time. A lot of times we have a sukkah, we make it in the backyard, and we use the wall of the house as one wall of the sukkah. Right? That's a pre-existing wall. I didn't build it when I built the house specifically. Maybe you did if you knew you were going to put the sukkah there, right? So now, right now, we're making a presumption and saying that Abaye and Rava have the same machloket. Abaye would say you can use a pre-existing wall for all different halachot, and Rava says no. So let's bring a few proofs and disproofs in each way. Tashima, haoseh sukato ben hailanot vilanot defanot la keshera. Okay, so I make my sukkah in the middle of a forest, and I'm going to use the trees to serve as some of the walls. That is okay. That's a Mishnah. Well, that seems pretty clear that there would be a proof for Abaye that you can use a pre-existing wall, and by parallel, a pre-existing lechi. We're assuming they're the same right now. So that's a good proof for Abaye. What would Rava say? Rava says, no, maybe not. Maybe I planted those trees at the beginning in mind that I'm going to use them one day as the wall of a sukkah. All right, not so likely, but okay, I guess it's possible. But if that's the case, then obviously, if I planted the tree specifically to be a wall of a sukkah, then obviously I could use it as a wall of a sukkah. Why would anybody say no in that case? Right? What does Mishnah have to teach us that? Well, because I might think that I should make a gezerah on Shabbat and Yom Tov. I'm not allowed to use a tree. You can't climb a tree. First of all, it's just work, exertion. Also, in the Bavli, you might come to pluck a fruit from it. So there's a general gezerah that you can't use a tree. So I might have thought I can't even use a tree as a wall, even though I'm not like hanging anything on it or climbing up it. I might have thought that. That's what the Mishnah is coming to teach me regarding this tree, that I can use a tree and it's not considered a prohibited usage. So therefore, I could interpret the Mishnah that I planted it at the beginning for use of a sukkah. So I can't learn anything from this Mishnah about a pre-existing wall. All right, let's try another. Tashema. היה שם אילן גדר או חיסת הקנים, נידון משום דיומד. Okay, so let's look at use a picture here. Diomad is, we had this also called pas bira'in, another name for it. This is if they have a well in the middle of Reshut Harabim, and so someone's walking and he wants to draw some water from it, he can't because the well is Reshut Hayachid, and he's in Reshut Harabim. So there's a special law that we're going to learn a lot more about called diumad, that you can make. Diumad is actually a Greek word. Dia is two, right? Two walls. So it's a double wall. It's a bracket on each corner. If you make 4 brackets on each of the corners, then it's kind of an imaginary enclosure. We consider this whole thing Reshut Hayachid, and then you can draw water. What this statement says is that if you had a tree or a fence, right, a fence that has poles, each of the poles are less than 3 tefachim apart, so you can say lavud, right, or just made out of a mat. All these things are okay, and you can use them as a double post. So you see here that this tree seems to be a pre-existing structure. And yet, I'm allowed to use it as a partition. So you see, this is a proof for Abaye that I'm allowed to use a pre-existing partition. So how's Rava going to answer? Well, you already know what he's going to answer. He's just going to use the same one as the first case. He made the tree on purpose. He knew that there's a well over there and people will want to pass through. So I'm going to put a tree and that'll be a good barrier. All right, it's possible. Yeah, but it's so. What's the chidush? What?
How big of a tree do you need? It's not like you can just plant it, and it has to be like, it doesn't have to have like amma by amma inside of it.
Good, right. It would have to be, the circumference would have to be big enough that if you take a quarter out of it, that you would have enough, right? It could make that if you cut into it, it could make a bracket of sufficient size.
With someone planting a tree for his grandchildren to use as the wall.
Yeah, it would take a while. That would take a while. That's right. Or maybe you put 2 trees or 3 trees, or maybe it means like bushes. You could put a kind of hedges there. Right. I mean, any case like that would be okay. So isn't that obvious? If I planted it specifically for that, of course it would be okay. This comes to teach us that if I make it out of reeds like this, kind of like just poles, and they're very thin poles like a fence, that I can use lavud. I might have thought that lavud does not apply to this kind of structure, since there's so much open space already, and the brackets are so small, they're just imaginary. I might think that the brackets have to be solid totally. And this, so this statement comes to teach me that even here I can use lavud, and I could just have poles less than three tefachim each from each other, and it's still considered like it's full. This happens to be a discussion that we'll come to later on Daf Yod Tet, and Bayeh is going to ask this question from Rabbah, and it will teach that that it isn't. They'll learn from here that it is in fact valid. Okay, so this proof for Abaye was not a conclusive proof. So third one, Tashema Ilan hamesich et al haaretz im en nofo gavoa min haaretz shelosha tefachim metaltelin tachtav. Okay, I have a tree, this big tree, and the branches hang down like a willow tree, and the branches hang down and go all the way to the ground, right? If they are close to the ground with less than 3 tefachim space from the branches to the ground, then I can carry under the tree. In other words, the branches, right, come down and act as walls. If they're more than 3 tefachim off of the ground, then just like a wall, that would not be a partition. So here you go, another tree case, and it says a tree we presume is a pre-existing structure, and yet I am allowed to use it to carry. I'm allowed to use it as a partition. Okay, same answer. Rabba could answer, well, maybe I planted it from the beginning for this purpose. Obviously, it's repeating the answer. So all this is a pre-existing structure. This sugya itself, right? It wants to fill in as many possibilities, and even though you kind of know what the answer is going to be, it's still instructive to go through the exercise. Because, well, you get to gather all these related sources, Mishnayot, Beraitot, and also we're going to get to ask, about each one. So what's the, a little bit more information about it. It's not, we're not supposed to be surprised by the answer. Okay. Hold on. If you really planted it from before, and so therefore it's a regular wall, a partition that you had in mind, then you should be able to carry under the entirety of the tree. However, Rav Huna gave a limitation that you can only carry up to an area of 2 bet se'ah, which is 5,000 square cubits. That's quite, a large area, and I don't know of any tree that would be that big, that would be 5,000 square cubits. But maybe it's many trees, or but the point of the question is, if I have walls can be as big as I want. It can cover as large area as I want, and all that will be like Reshut HaYachid, and I can carry. So why is there a limitation regarding the tree? Is there something about these partition walls that is not up to par? No. So Gemara answers, Mishum David Dirasha Tashbisha La'avir. There's the difference between a house that I'm going to live in and something like a guard tower. A guard tower is not made for itself for living in, but rather to be there to watch what's outside. And so any dwelling that its use is really a secondary, and the primary is for what goes on outside of that house, that has a limitation that it can be no bigger than 2 bet se'ah. Similarly, also a park, right? It can enclose a park, but let's say nobody lives in the park. There's no houses in it. Then the largest that the fence can be around the park would be this 2 bet se'ah. So we should be thankful to the homeless people that live in the park, and then they can make it bigger. Right? Okay, so that would be this case. So this tree is basically an outdoor type of structure, and that's why it has limitation. But the walls are perfectly fine, and this would be the same even if it was brick walls that I made specifically for this purpose. Okay, all right, you have one more. Tashema Shabbat Betel Shehu Gavoa Asara Vehu me'arba amot v'ad bet sa'atayim V'chen beneka shu amok asara Hu me'arba amot ad bet sa'atayim וכמה כסורה ושיבולת מקיפה אותה, מלאכת כולה וחוסה לה 2,000 אמה. Okay, I have 3 cases here. One, No picture. Okay. One is if I have a mound, right, like a little mountain that's at least 10 tefachim high and at least 4 by 4 amot, up to 2 bet. So that mound, because it's raised, is considered a reshut hayachid, and therefore I can carry right throughout that, and then 2,000 amot more. Or if the opposite, if it's a hole in the ground that's at least 10 by 10, at least 10 deep, right? Then the walls of that hole can be considered like walls. And then between 4 amot and 2 bet, also I can carry. And the last one, similar structure, is if I have tall grain, tall corn, a cornfield, and I reap an area in the middle. So the rest that I did not, the surrounding and enclosed grain, act as a wall. And so in all these cases, I'm allowed to carry within, and that's considered like my city, and then an additional 2,000 amot. So in all these cases, walls that I made are pre-existing walls. So that's the question. So maybe the third case, you could say, when I planted them and when I reaped them, I had in mind I'm going to make a wall here. It could be. But if you're talking about a cavity in a rock, right, or a mountain, these rocks are pre-existing from ages and ages ago. You can't go back and say, my great ancestor put this rock here. I mean, it's a part of the earth. It's part of the earth formation. Nobody made it. Okay, so therefore it would be impossible to say that this is a pre-existing wall. And this is a final blow. And so now we reject it. And in fact, we will now actually side with Abaye, but rather say that the machlok between Abaye and Rava is specific only to lechi. And although we tried to transfer it to partition as well, the mechitza, we see now that it didn't work. A pre-existing wall is a good wall. Okay, that's important to know. Now you can use a tree or the side of your house to build your sukkah, and everyone is in agreement with that. I mean, we had enough proofs. Each of the proofs we had was pretty good, and we tried to get out of it as, we really tried as hard as we could, but in the end, it was impossible to hold up that opinion for Rava. Okay, kipili ge belechi. And so let's get back to the original formulation. Abaye letame damar lechi mishum mechisa mechisa siyomeleha ave mechisa. Abaye says you can use a pre-existing lechi. Why? Because he thinks that a lechi is a fictional wall. We imagine as if this pole is extending across the width of the alley, and since it is an imaginary mechisa, and the mechisa can be pre-existing, therefore, this lechi can also be pre-existing. By the way, now you see the beautiful structure of the Gemara. Why did it go into this whole side point of mechisa, pre-existing mechisa, and then come to reject it? Well, actually, it came in handy, right? Because it's the foundation of Abaye's opinion. This is like when the Tanakh introduces a character, not for now, but because in a few chapters later, you're going to need to know him. So I think this is a nice artistic structure. Rava says the lechi is a sign, right? It's there just to draw your eye, and that way when you're walking, you will say, it's like having a sign, stop carrying here. And so therefore, it has to be something that I make for that purpose. It's not much of a sign if it's something already there. It's not going to be a good reminder unless I make it from the outset in order to be a reminder. Okay, so that makes sense, and this is a machloket regarding the reason for a lechi that runs throughout. We've seen it already a few times. Okay, so now let's try to bring a proof and disproof for this. Tashema abnei gader hayoseot min hagader muvdalot zo mizo pachot mishelosha and sarich lechi acher shelosha sarich lechi acher. That's this case here. Let's say I built a wall and I allowed the bricks to stick out, right? I didn't cut the bricks to make a straight line, but some of them are sticking out. So as long as the space between one row of bricks and the next one is less than 3 tefachim, then I can apply lavud, and I can say that this is one pole, and it's a pole that is sticking out of the wall. And so there you go, you have a lechi. Obviously, if it's more than 3 tefachim, then it's a few jutouts, and they don't join together to make a pole. And so we said that this is permitted, and this looks very much like a pre-existing structure. I made this wall to be a wall. It's a wall around the village, all right? And then yet I'm allowed to use it as a lechi. This is a proof for Abaye, who is lenient. All right, that seems like a pretty good proof. This is from a Tosefta. So, but Rava can answer. No, maybe I built it from the outset like this. I knew I was going to have a lechi. I didn't want to go get an extra pole, so I just didn't cut the brick. But when I laid that brick and it was sticking out, I said, this will be for a lechi. All right, maybe. But if so, then isn't it obvious? What does this Tosefta have to even teach us the law at all? Right? I mean, it's everyone would agree in that case. Now, the Tema de Masar Binyanahu da Abida Kamash Malan now teaches you that maybe you would have thought that the reason why you left this out, and everyone would assume that the reason why you left the brick sticking out is because at some point you want to continue building, and so you want to be able to just have it in the right format, in the right structure, so that you can go and continue. Maybe you want to build another wall this way or that way, and so that's why you left it like that. And so this Tosefta comes to teach that no, if you had in mind as a mavoy, then it's okay. You can use it as a mavoy. All right, so that was an attempted proof, but deflected. Second one, Tashema detaneh Rabbi Chia kotel shesido echad kanus mechavero ben shinem bachutz beshavem bebifnim ben shinem bebifnim beshavem bachutz nidon mishum lechi. We had this case before us, not here, where you have at the corner of the side post, I'll use a picture, right? At the corner of the side post, you have an indentation in the wall, right? On this side or on this side, in such a way either that you can see it from the inside but not on the outside, or you can see it from the outside. Let's say the indentation is here, but you can't see it from the inside. So if you have an indentation here, then you can use the part that's sticking out as a mavoy. And now this is a pre-existing indentation in the wall. And so this looks like it's part of the structure that was there already. And this would prove, again, for Abaye, that you can use a pre-existing structure as a lechi, right? Wouldn't that be a good proof? No, maybe when you built the wall, you built it with architectural in mind. You don't want an ugly post sticking out, but you arranged the wall to be in a shape that it would stick out, and so therefore it could be a pre-existing. Therefore, it was not pre-existing. You built it for that purpose. So what's the point? What are they even coming to teach us this law? It's coming to teach us that law that we discussed already. That if you have a lechi, it can be seen from outside in the street, but cannot be seen from inside, and the people walking inside. It's still considered a good lechi according to this opinion, because according to this opinion, there needs to be a reminder from those outside who are carrying that they should not continue carrying inside the mavoy. They also need a reminder. That was subject to a machloket. Okay, but that would be the chidush of this law. All right, so this second proof is deflected as well. We'll try a third one. Tashema. Rav havayatev ahu mevoah. Havayatev Rav Huna kameh. Amale leshama'eh zil aiti li kuza demaya. Okay, so Rav and the student Rav Huna are sitting in a mavoy on Shabbat, and Rav asked the student to, and so Rav Huna is there, and he said, go get me a pitcher of water. So he goes inside into one of the courtyards, gets some water. As he's coming out, right, the side post falls down. Once the side post falls down, we're no longer permitted to carry inside the mavoy. So Rav Huna went like this, don't carry here, right? The thing fell down. Okay, he froze, right? All right. So Amar le Rav Huna la sabar la mor lismoch ad dikla. So Rav Huna, Rav signaled in his hand, stop going. So Rav Huna asked his teacher, right, why can't you rely on the palm tree? Look, there's a palm tree also here. I know the side post fell down, but so what? Allow him to carry because there's a palm tree. Amale, very strong words. Rav says about Rav Huna, his student. He says, you, the scholar, Rav Huna, you're like someone who doesn't know anything. You don't know any of the teachings. Don't you know? He says, we didn't rely on it from yesterday. This tree was there. There was already a side post, so that we designated as a side post. We didn't designate the tree. So everybody knows you can't use a tree that was not designated from before Shabbat. Okay, well, Rav Huna learned his lesson that day. I'm sure he never forgot that one. Okay, but what's the point for us? What's the reason that he couldn't he couldn't use the tree? Because he did not designate it from before Shabbat. But if he did designate it before Shabbat, right, the implication is it would be okay. And this is a statement of Rav, right? A great first generation Amorah. And this would be now a proof for Abaye and against Rava. So this is a final proof for Abaye and that we accept. Okay. Now we try one more time to save them. Maybe since we just rejected Rava in the case where you didn't designate it, maybe their machloket is when you didn't designate it at all. And maybe in that case, even Abaye would say you can use a pre-existing structure that you didn't designate, kind of like what Rav Huna wanted to do in this case, right? Is it possible that and that's the machloket, and then that would fit all the sources above. La sakadatech tahu barka Rava bebar chabu tahu peligeba Abaye v'Rava ule shenaihu. Now it can't be because there was a certain balcony in this person's house that was had exactly this kind of structure that they relied on a pillar that was already there, and they disagreed. Abaye and Rava disagreed about this, right, throughout their careers, and so you see that they're disagreeing about something that was a pre-existing structure, and the question is it and designated, right, and designated for Shabbat, and the question is if it's pre-existing, can you use it or not? So that's the final thing, right? So to conclude, if it was built there for mechisa, if it's a mechisa partition, a pre-existing partition, everyone agrees is good. Regarding a lechi, if it was built for that purpose, obviously it's good. If it was not designated before Shabbat, everyone agrees that it's not good. And the question is only if it was pre-existing, but I did designate it before Shabbat. That is the subject of the machloket Abaye and Rava, and all of the proofs here side in favor of Abaye that this would be permitted. All right, good. So that concludes that section. Now we go to the next Mishnah, where we're going to be talking about using live animals for different things, including writing a get on a live animal. All right, let's see. Bakol osin lechayayin. You can use anything to make a lechi. Even something that's alive. So here's a nice picture, right? You take a horse and you just tie it to the wall, and it'll stay there the whole Shabbat. Poor horse. So I don't know why you'd want to do this.
This is obviously just hypothetical, right? They're not really considering tying horses to the wall for the whole Shabbat.
I hope it's hypothetical. Yeah, I do think so. But wondering if a plant is alive. Wondering if something that's kind of sedentary, maybe like a turtle or something, you put it there, and maybe it wouldn't mind staying in one place for 24 hours.
Right.
Okay. So for whatever reason you'd want to do this, right? It is the point is it is a lechi, whether it's nice to the animals or not. Okay. Rabbi Meir say not Rabbi Meir says no. But mishum golel. Also, a golel is a tomb cover. I mean, this could be like a grave that we think of that you just put the cover on. More likely, it's called golel because it's something that rolls. They used to bury their dead in caves or man-made rooms, man-made tombs, and they would, it was like the family all shared one, and they put all their ancestors in the same one, and then they would cover it with a big stone that they would roll on top of the entrance to the grave. So there's a special halacha that anything you use as a golel becomes tameh. Even things that wouldn't normally become tameh, like if you use a horse or an elephant. And again, this is even stranger because the golel would have to stay there for a long time, for many years, decades. But technically, you can use an elephant and stand it in front of the opening of the grave, and that would be okay. Okay, maybe it would be practical. Maybe if you need to access it within a short time, let's say there's 2 burials and you had one, and then 2 hours later you're going to be another one. You don't want to move the whole heavy stone, so you just put your horse there for a couple of hours. All right, maybe they would do it. Anyway, the point is that you can use it. So that saying that it becomes tameh is a way of saying that you can use it as a golel. Rabbi Meir says, no, you can use it. And just like he says, it doesn't work as a lechi, so too it will not contain the tumah, and it itself is considered tahor because it's an animal. Doesn't have the law of a golel. We're going to be talking about this one the most, that you can write a get on it. Usually, get a divorce paper, you write on a piece of parchment, right? Or something like that, some writing material. But let's say for some reason, you go and write it on the side of your horse, right while it's alive, and you just write it on there. Maybe it would be good as a delivery service, right? Because it could just run there, and the woman will, the wife will take it, and thereby be divorced. Okay. Rabbi Yosef Galili posel. Rabbi Yosef Galili says, no, you cannot do that. All right, that's the Mishnah. Tanya. Rabbi Meir Omer, kol davar sheyesh bo ruach hayim en osin oto, lo dofen lasuka v'lo lechi lamavoy v'lo pasin labiraot v'lo golel lakeber. So we have a braita that expands on the Mishnah. This is the opinion of Rabbi Meir. Says Rabbi Meir said in the Mishnah that it's not allowed. So it's expanding. It says anything that is alive, you cannot use it, not for a wall of a sukkah. Right, so it's another famous case in Masechet Sukkah. You take some elephants and leave them there for 7 days, and they'll be the walls of your sukkah. No, you can't do that, and you cannot use a live animal as a lechi, and you cannot use it as a corner wall, a corner when we have a well in the middle, that bracket. And not a covering for a tomb. And so the Rabbi Meir would allow to write a divorce paper on it, but Rabbi Yosef says no, not even that. So you have stages. Tanakh Kama says everything is allowed. Rabbi Meir says most things are not allowed. Rabbi Yosef says animals cannot be used for anything. All right, let's analyze that last opinion. My Tamad Rabbi Yosef Galili, Tanya Sefer, Enli Ela Sefer. Okay, the pasuk regarding divorce is one basic pasuk. This is bechatav la sefer keritut v'natan biyada. So he has to write for her a scroll of separation and give it into her hands. So we're going to analyze each of these words to try to figure out what can be used and what can't be used. So sefer means a scroll, something on parchment. How do you know that you can use anything else? Because it says vechatav la sefer. So those extra words vechatav la means you write it on anything, anything you could possibly write on. So why does it say sefer then? Just say vechatav la. Why does it have to say chatav la in a scroll? Doesn't that seem to come to limit it? Lomar lecha ma sefer davar she'en bo ruach hayim ve'eno ochel, af kol davar she'en bo ruach hayim ve'eno ochel. Sefer comes to limit. So you have a compromise. On the one hand, you have chatav la, sounds like you could write on anything. Sefer sounds like only on parchment. Or make a compromise of the kind of common denominator. What's special about a sefer? A scroll that is not alive and it's not food, even though it comes from an animal, but it's made out of the skin, so it's not edible. So therefore, not only a parchment, but anything that is not alive and not edible, you can also use for this. So you can use like a clay pottery and write on it, right? So lots of things that can be included, but not a live animal. That's Rabbi Yosef Galili's derivation of the pasuk. Good. But Rabbanan, now the rabbis who say you can write a get on a live animal, what are they going to do with the pasuk, right? Doesn't it say that besefer only, sefer says sefer keditut? So the rabbis say miketiv ba sefer. It doesn't say write it in a scroll, rather sefer without a bet. Ketiv l'sfirut devarim be'al mahu data. Sefer comes to mean that you should write the content, the content of the scroll, that you have to write the story. You have to write the contents. This is, behold, from now on you can marry anyone you want. So that's chatabla. So you write sefer keditut, a story about a separation. Okay, so that's what. Therefore, it does not come to talk about your materials. All right, v'Rabbanan v'hai v'chatabla ma'idadishla. So Rabbanan, what do they need v'chatabla for? Since there's no limitation anyway. Haumi ba'yaleh b'chitiba mitkareshet v'na mitkareshet b'chesef. Oh, it's to teach us something interesting, that you have to write a divorce. In order to divorce a woman, you have to write it down, put it in writing, and you cannot divorce someone with money. You might have thought that just like you do kiddushin and you acquire the right to marry a woman with money, so too divorce would also have to be with money, a kind of legal or symbolic sale. I don't know how it would work exactly. I guess she would give back the coin or something like that, right? And thereby free herself to go and marry. So you might have thought that kiddushin and gitin are parallel in the sense. Therefore, the pasuk comes and says, no, it doesn't work that way. You have to do it in writing. Okay. There are many, there are some Bible scholars, it happens to be, that they say that the whole law, why does the Torah emphasize v'chatabla, it has to be in writing? This is to come to undo an ancient practice where men would divorce their wives just by speaking, right? They just say, get out, right? Supposedly Islamic law still has that, I'm not sure, right? But you say get out 3 times and then you're divorced. And that's not very good for shalom bayit, and really not good for family structure or for women's rights. And so therefore the Torah says, no, you gotta do a little bit more than that. You come to the scribe, you come to the court. Hopefully they'll calm the people down, and women won't just be treated like a worker who you just fire at any time.
What does havaya mean in the previous paragraph?
To becoming, being.
Being, cool.
To become, to enter into. Yeah. Havaya, same word as haya, lihiyot. Okay, Rabbi Yosef Galili, hi sevara menale. How does Rabbi Yosef Galili know this law that you have to write something down and can't and not through money? Nafka le misefer keditut sefer korta and davar acher korta. Oh, so he can learn it from the sefer keditut. He took that as a scroll anyway. So it says a scroll can separate them, but not anything else, not money, not words. Rabbanan, hay sefer keditut miba'ele, the davar hakoret beno lebena. So what does Rabbanan, what do they do with that term sefer keditut? The word keditut, right? What does that mean? Oh, so you need it to be an absolute separation. It's very interesting halacha. Lechet hare zekitech al menat shelo tishti yain, al menat shelo telchi lebet abich leolam, and zekiditut. Kol sheloshim yom hare zekiditut. You can't make a divorce on condition. You can't say a divorce on condition that you'll never drink wine, or on condition that you never go back to your father's house, right? Or on condition that you don't see that guy, right? You can't have a conditional divorce, because the divorce has to be absolute. You have totally have separation of the relationship. And if there's any possibility that it could reawaken if she goes and does drink wine, then it's not really a separation. If they make a time limit and says you are divorced as long as you don't drink wine for the next 30 days, that's okay, because eventually after 30 days, then it will be an absolute separation. Okay, this is a relevant halacha, because people have thought about the possibility of solving the akudah problem by making a conditional divorce. if I ever request to get it and you don't give it, then here's this divorce will something like that. But you see, it's very complicated to make conditional divorces. Okay, but Rabbi Yosef Rabbi Yosef can still learn that because the word kiritut is a plural. It could have just said karet. Instead it says kiritut in the plural form. So that teaches us this extra law that has to be absolute and not conditional. But Rabbanan, what do they do with the plural? Karet kiritut la darshe. No, they don't learn anything. That's just that's just a regular style to write it in that way, and they don't derive anything new from there. Okay, so that's a very interesting discussion regarding writing things on live animals. And now the final Mishnah for today. Shayara shechanta babika vekifuha kele behema shemetaltilin betocha bilbad sheyehe gader gavoa 10 tefachim velo yihu perasot yeterot al habinyan. Okay, if I have a caravan, this is a cool case. There's my picture of a caravan. Here. Okay. So I have a caravan and we stop over on Shabbat to rest. And so I take the camels and the saddles and all the different bags and items and I use them as a wall, right? So that's convenient because they're there anyway. So that's okay. But as long as it's 10 tefachim high, right, all around, and you can't have the gaps more than the walls. So it's okay to have some gaps, right, because you're allowed to have entrances, but it has to be more wall than space. Okay, good. Kol pirsa shi ke'aser amot muteret. Another limitation, no single space can be more than 10, right? Because then that's just too big a space. If it's 10, if it's less than 10 or less, then that's okay because that's an opening. That's the Mishnah. Itemar, parus keomed, Rav Papa amar mutar, Rav Huna bered Rav Yoshua amar asur. What if you have exactly that the exactly equal, that the gapped part is equal to the walled part, right? I know you said it has to be majority, so obviously majority walled is okay, majority gapped is not okay. But what if it's exactly equal? Rav Papa says it's allowed. Rav Huna says it's not allowed. Again, not such a practical relevant thing because are we going to be exactly right to the millimeter or just add one little pole somewhere? Okay, but what is the law? We need to know. Rav Papa amar mutar iachi agmareh rachamana leMoshe lo tifros ruba. Rav Papa is the one that said it's allowed because they're kind of like now trying to reconstruct what did Hashem tell Moshe at Har Sinai when he told him this law. This law is Torah Sheba'al Peh, right? Is all Torah Sheba'al Peh. So what was the formulation of the original law? He says it must have been don't breach the majority. So don't breach the majority, but if it's equal, it's okay. It just can't be the breach can't be the majority. Rav Huna ben Rav Yoshua amar asur hachi agmareh rachamana leMoshe gedor ruba. No, the original formulation of that Torah Sheba'al Peh was that it has to be you have to circumscribe most of it, right? Wall most of it. So therefore, if it's equal, then it's not mostly wall, and therefore it's not good. So was it formulated in the negative or formulated in the positive? That original tradition. Okay, well we don't know because we don't have a recording of that. So we have to prove it with Mishnah. Tenan lo yehu perisot yeterot al binyan. Ha kabinyan mutar. Mishnah. That's our Mishnah right here. Just said that the opening, the gaps cannot be more than the wall, than what's built. So if it's equal, then it's okay, right? That seems to be a good proof. Latema ha kabinyan mutar. Ela ema im binyan yater pisam mutar. No, don't infer from it that the gaps can't be more. Don't infer from that if it's equal, it's okay. But rather, only infer the opposite, that if the built part is more, then it's okay. but don't infer the middle case. Well, why not? Aval kebinyan mai. What if it is exactly equal? Asur yachid litne lo yupirsot kabinyan. If the Mishnah thought that being equal is allowed, it should have said it's not allowed. It should have said it can't be, the gaps cannot be the same as what's built. So kashya, this is in fact a great difficulty. Our Mishnah, the formulation of our Mishnah, really seems to indicate that it would be okay if it was equal. Of course, you could always argue that the Mishnah didn't have that case in mind of exactly equal. It wasn't going down to that level. I guess that's what they were trying to argue in here in the middle, right? But in the end, if we do assume that the language is precise, this proves that it's permitted, and a good proof for Rav Papa, and a disproof of Rav Huna b'neder Rav Yoshua. And so we conclude this one with kashya. There's no other answer. Now, kashya is not as strong as tiyufta, where it's an absolute proof. Kashya just means it's very difficult to fit it in, but it's not an absolute knockout. So we're going to still try to bring yet another support for Rav Papa, that equal is allowed. Tashema hamkare sukato bashipodin or barukot hamita im yesh revach benehen kemotan keshe'era. If I have a sukkah and I have non-kosher, just a board, which is not a kosher schach, and a kosher schach, or the kosher or the non-kosher schach is poles, and the kosher schach is in the middle. So if I have the exact same non-kosher, kosher, non-kosher, kosher, and they're exactly equal, that's the case here. Kishara, it's okay. So there you go. Exactly equal is permitted, and we're assuming that this would be the same. The law of a sukkah would be the same as regarding a wall around the city. So there you go. That's a good proof for the papa that equal is okay. Now maybe we're dealing with the case regarding that we're using poles, right? Like these metal poles, which are not schach, but we make them loose, and so we could take them in and out easily. So there's really space between the poles. And let's say you assume that we put schach on top of that whole thing, and that way, here I have a picture, this one. So if we make it loose, right, and we put schach on top, then there'll be a little bit of schach in between, and there'll be a little bit more schach than non-kosher poles. So it could be. Well, but why would you assume that? I mean, that's not a typical case. If you're using these metal poles, metal poles are pretty straight and they're pretty easy to be precise, and you can put them in there exactly. So, what's the problem? It's talking about a case where you add even more roofing on top. Or a second answer, and I'll show you the picture. That's the last line for the daf. And so it's kind of like this: either that you pile on a lot of schach in the kosher area, or if the non-kosher schach goes in one direction, you put the kosher schach in the other direction, perpendicular to it, so that it's actually overlapping. And so in the end, you have more material and more surface area that has good schach than non-kosher schach. Now, this is interesting because obviously, if let's say you put, boards, let's say the boards, non-kosher boards were bigger than the majority. Well, then having as much schach as you put on top, you could put, many feet of schach, it still wouldn't make it kosher, right? Any kosher schach on top of non-kosher schach is not kosher. It doesn't work. But I think it's specifically in this case because it's exactly even, right? Exactly equal. So therefore, you're just having a little bit more of a mass or a little bit more of an overlap that will tilt the balance to kosher schach, and then that way you would be allowed to use that. So we had a lot of very interesting, mostly I guess theoretical cases, but theoretical cases that brought out some interesting and important principles, and also introduced us to lots of new sources. Baruch Adonai L'olam, amen, amen.